It should be a self-evident truth that a democracy without women's participation on all levels is not a democracy. For a long time in its history, American democracy, like most others, did not include women, no matter how hard they tried. Think, for instance, about Abigail Adams, wife to John Adams, who threatened a rebellion if not included in this new independency of his. Or about Penelope Barker and her peers who organized a Tea Party of their own in Edenton, North Carolina in 1774 to annoy the British king. Or remember Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who wrote yet another declaration, the Declaration of Sentiments, in 1848. The impassioned speeches of Sojourner Truth shook her audience, and Ida B. Wells rallied for the black women's vote. Many others circulated pamphlets and manifestos and even dared to run for the highest office in the country, the presidency. Victoria Woodhull was the first to do so in 1872. This year commemorates the passage of the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution that 100 years ago finally granted universal suffrage to American women and, at least in name, secured their admittance to that political system called US democracy. Ellen Carroll Du Bois has documented the long and thoroughly racialized struggle for full participation vividly and meticulously in her study Suffrage, Women's Long Battle for the Vote, and she names it the largest mass enfranchisement in national history. At the time of its passage, the political, social, and cultural climate of the so-called progressivist era impressed quite a few female visitors who came to the United States. Ali Salomon, a renowned German Jewish educator, writes in her travel book, "I have always felt, already after my first visit to the States, that if I were ever to be reborn in this world as a woman, I would only wish to be born in the United States." Salomon's observation is shared by many German women crossing the Atlantic for the first time then. American women, notwithstanding their comparable legal status, apparently had better access to education than their old world peers, and they appear to be more respected in the public sphere. Still, Salomon's feminist twisting of a powerful tradition in America of utopia and about America as utopia was perhaps somewhat too enthusiastic. It focused mainly on the privilege of white middle-class women and, unbeknownst to her perhaps, coincided with a virulent nativism that eventually led to the passage of the Restrictive Immigration Act of 1924. The successful inclusion of some women in the political process went hand in hand with a newly institutionalized discrimination, what we would call the exclusion of others. Is this a lesson and a legacy we have taken to heart? Let us fast forward. In most contemporary assessments, the dystopian imagination clearly outweighs the utopian just mentioned. And many of us would be hard-pressed to chime in with Salomon's born-again wish. Moreover, in the widely revitalized genre of the feminist dystopia, various kinds of repressive authoritarian regimes exist on the territory of the present or near future United States. In much acclaimed novels by established authors such as Margaret Atwood, Louise Erdrich, and Guillen, women once again fear for their lives and their rights in worlds that subdue their voices, deny their human rights, and control their reproduction. Needless to say that patriarchy and authoritarianism of any kind are hardly compatible with universally acknowledged democratic ideals. Oppression increases in tandem with nationalist agendas and religious fundamentalism. It subverts the very basis of liberal society. The plots of fundamentalist renationalization in those dystopian novels unfortunately do not appear very far-fetched and are not entirely void of verisimilitude. Rather, they seem to reflect and expand ad extremis on the backlash gathering momentum in many Western democracies and its attempts to either contain feminism, even abolish or outlaw it, or to appropriate it for the sake of a right-wing authoritarian ideology. The use of feminism as a label may be at times as problematic as what in the past has been covered by the label democracy. Zahra Ahmed reminds us that the export of democracy has been complicit with colonialism and even conquest around the globe. Taking down patriarchs is not the same as taking down patriarchy. Susan Faludi has pointed this out, and even taking down patriarchy is not enough, I want to suggest, when we do not take on heteronormative and racist structures at the same time. In the recent rhetorical right-wing hijacking of feminism, a revived ethno-nationalism strongly reminiscent of the nativism of 100 years ago replaces multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism. It is in the name of women's rights, as Sarah Ferris has noted in her observation of European political culture, that a cultural nationalization generates a kind of pseudo-feminism. This rise of femo-nationalism on both sides of the Atlantic deals in nativist fantasies of purity and is premised on the fixation of saving white women from foreign border-crossing non-white men. And it calls for immediate action. At stake is not the well-being of women, individually or collectively, so much as the well-being of the Volkskörper, an organicist, essentialist notion of the body politic, cunningly updated and re-romanticized. Sadly, the constituency for nativist ideas of this kind has always included women as well, those who let themselves be wrapped up in Volkskörper sentimentality. This has once again forged few unlikely and insidious alliances in recent times. Every woman adores a fascist, Sylvia Plath once wrote succinctly, albeit in a different context. Do they? It is this famous line of the poet that has crossed my mind again lately. Trying to remove herself elegantly from such debates decades ago, Virginia Woolf, in the spirit of anti-chauvinism and anti-fascism, famously declared, "As a woman, I have no country. As a woman, I want no country. As a woman, my country is the whole world." And Woolf is not alone in calling for a different, transnational and open form of community. Diasporic black women activists have long conceptualized dynamic forms of belonging apart from the nation. In the words of Audre Lorde, community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. Woolf and Lorde remind us today that the fight for women's rights has been and continues to be an international and transnational one. A timely reminder in the month of the International Women's Day. Moreover, Woolf's declaration echoes another genre that, next to the dystopian novel, has internationally seen a renaissance of late: the Feminist Manifesto. A manifesto is a programmatic text for public recital and public display. It is often utopian in scope and vision, calling for profound political and social change. The output of manifestos rises in times of political crisis, and the new feminist manifestos attest to a severe crisis, pointing to deficits in the democratic system they want to see remedied. The manifestos by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Mary Beard, Marie Rotkopf, and Sara Ahmed, to name but a few, may at times diffuse genre conventions and may appear to be politically plurivocal. But most certainly they all attempt to counter the bleak politics of a dystopian heteropatriarchy becoming real these days with a programmatic call for alternative horizontal affiliations. Perhaps the Thomas and Katja Mann House is as good a place for democratic manifestos now as it was in the 1940s. Much in the spirit of feminism's long-standing practice, we may want to transform this private domestic sphere into a highly political public space. A space from which to recall the transatlantic networks of the past and to reflect on the vision of a transnational civil society for the future of democracy around the world. This task certainly includes the transnational legacy and futures of intersectional feminism and an ongoing dedication to its unfinished business, here and elsewhere.